Story 1. The Roommate. It was my freshman year at Penn State University. I had just finished hauling the last of my plastic bins up to the third floor of Hastings Hall. My parents hugged me goodbye, drove off, and left me standing in the middle of a cramped, half-unpacked dorm room. Later that afternoon, the door swung open, and my roommate finally arrived. Right from the get-go, I knew this guy was the most socially inept person I had ever encountered. I stuck out my hand, trying to be welcoming. "Hey man, I'm Dan." He paused. He looked down at my outstretched hand with blank, unblinking eyes, as if he didn't understand the concept of a handshake. Then he let out a sharp, awkward laugh, went, "Oh," and offered me a hand so limp it felt like holding a dead fish. He didn't even volunteer his own name. I had to awkwardly ask for it while dragging my hand back. "Dale," he muttered. I tried to make standard freshman small talk, asking about his major, where he was from, what music he liked. Dale just answered with clipped yes or no responses, occasionally letting out that same hollow, mechanical laugh. Within minutes, the conversation died completely. We were just two strangers sitting on opposite beds, staring at our laptops in deafening silence. It was suffocating. That night, I secretly decided I was going to email the housing office first thing Monday morning to request a room change. Anyone would be better than Dale. I thought he was just an incredibly awkward kid, but I soon learned it ran much deeper than that. The first night, I went out to explore the campus and met a few guys down the hall who seemed completely normal and cool. When I finally walked back into the dorm around 9:30 p.m., the room was pitch black, except for the harsh blue glare of a laptop screen. Dale was sitting in the exact same rigid position he had been in hours ago. "What's up, Dale?" I said, trying to shake off the weird vibe. No answer, not even a head turn. I climbed into bed, clicked off my desk lamp, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. I laid there for hours, listening to the aggressive, rhythmic clicking of his mouse. It wasn't until 3 a.m. that I finally heard the soft clack of his laptop lid closing. I finally drifted off, but woke up less than an hour later to a subtle shift in the room's light. Someone had pulled the window blinds completely open. The cold, pale moonlight was flooding the room, casting long, distorted shadows across the linoleum. I blinked, adjusting my eyes, and my heart skipped a beat. Dale was sitting completely upright on the edge of his mattress, his torso angled directly toward me. In the moonlight, I could see his eyes wide open, staring unblinkingly at my face. I sat up fast, rubbing my eyes, adrenaline spiking. "Dale, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't flinch. He just whispered a flat, toneless, "Sorry," and slowly pivoted back into his sheets. The next morning was Saturday, the first official weekend of the semester, filled with mandatory campus orientation and outdoor festivities. As my orientation group was walking past the university botanical gardens, I noticed a small crowd of students ahead of me, slowing down, pointing into the foliage. "What is that kid doing in there?" a girl whispered. I peered over her shoulder and froze. It was Dale. He was sitting cross-legged in the damp dirt behind a thick patch of rhododendron bushes. He was completely ignoring the crowd, staring intently at a massive oak tree while aggressively rubbing his bare palm against the rough bark over and over until his skin looked raw. The orientation leader was too far ahead to notice. I just lowered my head and walked by, a deep pit forming in my stomach. I casually murmured to the kids next to me that the guy in the dirt was my roommate, mostly as a defense mechanism to start a conversation. They gave me a look of pure pity. "Man, sorry about your luck," one of them said. We laughed about it, but none of us really knew if it was actually funny. The silver lining was that I made plans to hang out with those guys later that night. Even better, when I checked my student portal later that afternoon, the housing department had approved an emergency swap. I was getting moved to a new floor on Sunday. That evening, I dressed up to go meet my new friends. Dale was sitting in his desk chair, but this time the chair was pulled out into the exact center of the room, facing the door. "Oh, hey man, what's up?" I said, grabbing my wallet. "Nothing," he replied. It was incredibly matter-of-fact. When I returned to the room past midnight, Dale was asleep. I sat on my bed, opened my laptop, and immediately noticed something was wrong. I had left the laptop on my desk, and I distinctly remember leaving the lid closed. Now it was slightly open. When the screen lit up, my stomach dropped. Every single one of my unread emails had been opened. Folders containing personal documents, high school photos, and tax forms had been clicked through and left open on the desktop. Dale had snooped through my entire digital life. The next morning, as I was packing my duffel bags, I confronted him. "Hey Dale, did you touch my computer last night?" "No," he responded. He snapped the word out incredibly loudly, barely a half second after I finished my sentence, his voice cracking with a strange, defensive rage. I could read him like a book, but since I was leaving in a matter of hours, I didn't want to escalate things. I went to my closet to grab my favorite pajamas from the drawer, only to find that all of my clothes had been rummaged through, unfolded, and shoved back in haphazardly. He had been through everything I owned. I barely slept that final night. Around 3:30 a.m., I was jolted awake by a sharp, metallic sound. Zzz. I sat up instantly. The room was dark, but the silhouette on the floor was unmistakable. Dale was on his hands and knees on my side of the room, slowly pulling open the zipper of my backpack. I slammed my hand onto the lamp switch, flooding the room with yellow light. "What the hell are you doing in my bag, Dale?" He didn't panic. He just looked up at me with a completely blank, vacant expression, playing dumb. "I think you have my toothbrush by mistake." It was the closest thing to wits he had shown all weekend, but it was a pathetic lie. My toothbrush was in a plastic cup on my desk. His hands were inside a bag full of textbooks. I knew something was profoundly wrong with his mental state, so I didn't get physical. I just stared him down until he slunk back to his side of the room. By noon on Sunday, I was completely moved into my new dorm in Stone Hall. My new roommate, a regular guy named Marcus, was no social butterfly, but he was miles better than Dale. We had a normal conversation, watched some TV, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in 3 days, I felt safe. But at 2:15 a.m., for the third night in a row, I woke up to a strange noise. It was a faint, metallic clicking sound. It wasn't consistent, but it was repeating at least twice every 30 seconds. Click, click. I got up quietly, hoping it was just a mouse or a heavy backpack shifting against a loose floorboard. But as I crept across the cold floor, I realized the sound wasn't in our room. It was coming from the hallway, right on the other side of our door. The nightlight in the common area outside was always bright, casting a faint glow under the door crack. I leaned in, holding my breath, and pressed my eye against the peephole. My heart practically stopped, because the person on the other side was standing so close to the door, all I could see through the fisheye lens was the top of a scalp. The person was leaning their head completely down, pressing their ear directly to our door frame. Now that I was paying closer attention, I realized the tiny clicking noise wasn't footsteps. It was the sound of someone slowly, meticulously turning our doorknob, trying to find a way to unlock it from the outside. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed the campus police department. They arrived in under 5 minutes, their heavy boots echoing down the common room floorboards. Only when I heard the officers shout did I feel safe enough to unlock and open the door. There, out in the hallway, were two campus police officers pushing a student against the wall, slapping heavy metal cuffs onto his wrists. It was Dale. I told the officers everything, how he was my former roommate, how he had stalked my belongings, and how I had just fled his room that very morning. He had tracked me across campus to my new building just to try and break into my room while I slept. As they dragged him away, Dale looked back at me over his shoulder. He wasn't angry. He just had that same dead-eyed, empty smile plastered across his face. I never saw him again. He was either suspended for the semester or permanently expelled. I finished my degree at Penn State without another incident, but to this day, whenever I hear the faint, rhythmic click of a doorknob in the dark, my blood runs completely cold.
Story 2. The Nature Preserve. After my freshman year, I transferred to Binghamton University in upstate New York. I spent 2 great years there, quickly embedding myself into a solid group of friends. We did everything together, usually spending our weekends hit or miss at local house parties. But one chilly Friday night in October, our main group didn't have any major plans. Me and 2 of my closest friends, Tyler and Ryan, decided to do something low-key. We packed a backpack full of beers and headed out to the university's Nature Preserve. Deep within the preserve, right by the edge of the lake, there was a small, hidden clearing. It was a legendary spot among a select few students because it was so far from the main campus view that university security or campus police almost never patrolled it. Kids would occasionally go out there to drink, smoke, or hang out around a campfire without getting caught. That night, we gathered some dry logs, lit a small fire, and cracked open our beers, having what we jokingly called a bro chat. As the night wore on, the autumn chill grew sharper, and the alcohol began to take a heavy effect. We were telling old high school stories, laughing so hard that at one point, Tyler was literally rolling around in the dead leaves on the forest floor. Suddenly, Ryan stopped laughing. His face went rigid. "Shh, shut up for a second," he whispered. We all perked up, freezing in place. The crackling of our campfire suddenly felt deafeningly loud, but underneath it, coming from the deep darkness of the woods, we heard the unmistakable heavy crunch of footsteps stepping on dry leaves and snapping fallen branches. Our immediate reaction was pure panic. We were all under 21, and getting caught with alcohol on campus grounds meant an automatic citation. Tyler quickly grabbed the open beer bottles and tossed them silently into the pitch-black lake, while I scrambled to shove the remaining cans back into my backpack. I was moderately drunk, so my paranoia was spiking way higher than usual. The crackling fire, which had felt so warm and inviting minutes ago, now felt like a massive neon sign exposing our exact location to whoever was creeping through the thickets. But the thing was, this spot was incredibly deep into the preserve. It was rare for anyone to wander out here past midnight, let alone on a freezing October night. We listened intently. It sounded just like one person. Then, the sharp, violent snap of a thick tree branch breaking just 30 feet away made all 3 of us jump. None of us were confrontational guys. Our group lacked that one brave, overly confident friend who would step up and yell, "Who's out there?" into the dark. Instead, we just sat there in absolute paralyzed silence, aggressively shushing each other, our eyes darting wildly into the shadows beyond the firelight. Then, the footsteps started moving again, but they weren't approaching us, and they weren't walking away. Whoever it was, they were circling us. We could hear the faint rhythmic rustling of leaves moving in a wide, sweeping arc around our campsite.
At first, Tyler tried to let out a nervous chuckle, whispering that it was probably just a deer. But a deer doesn't walk with the heavy, deliberate, heel-to-toe cadence of a human being. It felt like we were trapped in a scene from the Blair Witch Project. The sounds of cracking wood and rustling brush kept echoing from different angles of the dark woods, closing in on us. Then, out of absolute nowhere, a massive, deafening thud exploded right in the center of our campfire, sending a massive shower of orange sparks exploding into the night sky. Tyler didn't wait around to analyze it. He let out a terrified yelp, spun on his heel, and took off running down the dark trail toward campus. Ryan and I stood there for a split second, looking at each other in a state of sheer shock, half laughing out of pure hysterics, half consumed by raw terror. We still couldn't comprehend if this was some elaborate, messed-up prank by another group of students or something far worse. We got our answer a second later. Whack! Another heavy branch flew out of the pitch black, striking Ryan squarely across the side of his face. He let out a sharp scream of agony, clutching his cheek as he stumbled backward onto the dirt. That was the breaking point. The illusion of a prank was completely shattered. I lunged forward, grabbed Ryan by his jacket, dragged him back to his feet, and we hauled absolute ass down the trail, running faster than I ever thought humanly possible. I had the heavy backpack bouncing against my spine, my flashlight beam shaking violently against the twisted roots and low-hanging branches of the preserve. When we finally burst through the tree line and hit the paved road that separated the nature preserve from the campus dorms, we collapsed against a metal guardrail, gasping for air, our lungs burning in the freezing air. Ryan's face was bruised and bleeding, but he was alive. We thought we were safe, but the nightmare wasn't over. As we stood there, catching our breath, we heard the terrifying sound of heavy, rapid footsteps sprinting through the brush, coming directly down the trail we had just fled. Whoever was out there was relentlessly hunting us down to the edge of the woods. "Run!" I wheezed. We scrambled across the asphalt, sprinted into our residential hall, and slammed our keycards against the scanner, barricading ourselves inside the heavy glass doors of the lobby. We ran all the way up to our floor and burst into Tyler's room, finding him sitting on his bed, pale as a sheet, trembling. The three of us rushed to his bedroom window, which looked directly out over the dark expanse of the woods we had just escaped. We looked down. Underneath the dim glow of a distant campus street lamp, right at the edge of the tree line, a dark, hooded silhouette was pacing slowly back and forth along the asphalt. They were just pacing, watching the dorm windows. Every single time a car or campus security vehicle drove down the road, the figure would melt seamlessly back into the shadows of the trees, only to re-emerge the second the taillights disappeared. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the silhouette stepped back into the daunting blackness of the preserve for good. We spent the rest of the night locked inside that dorm room, drinking the remaining beers in a state of absolute manic shock. Within 10 minutes, the adrenaline had us laughing about it, trying to downplay the terror. But the next morning, when the sun came up and the alcohol wore off, the reality of what happened truly set in. Someone had stalked us, circled us like prey, and violently assaulted us in the dead of night for absolutely no reason. Needless to say, we never stepped foot inside those woods after dark ever again.